sure a lot of us were caught by surprise when season 3 was announced. Were you ever at the point of being surprised, or did you always think it would happen?
Oh, no, I can't say I always thought it would happen. I mean, I always hoped it would happen, and I don't think I ever thought there's no possible way it could ever come back. I've been on shows where I feel like there's no possible way it'll ever come back, but this didn't feel like one of them. And there was such a sort of groundswell of support from the fans that I did think, wow, I think maybe we have a chance. And I think we found out about that it was a go, that we got a green light only about 10 days before the announcement. So we had a little bit of warning, but not a lot. But we had been talking with Sam Register at Warner Brothers for almost a year before that, where it was sort of like, maybe, so it wasn't a huge surprise by the time it actually came around and they made the announcement, but still there's a surreal quality to it. I mean, every time we start a new step in the process, or like we're at a recording session and one of the season 1 or 2 actors comes back to do a role that they played back then, and it happens all over again. It's like, we're back, and everyone's like, we're back, and it's really a feeling that we haven't lost track of, that we really the sort of, there's still a miraculous quality to it, even though I thought it was always a possibility, and even though the groundswell seemed to indicate maybe this could happen, and Warner Brothers seemed to indicate maybe it could happen, I still, to this day, think it's still kind of a minor miracle that it actually is happening. And I don't think we've lost that sense in making season 3, even now, that we just are still sort of kind of giddy. I don't know how else to describe it, over the fact that we're getting to do this thing that we love more of it, and so that's kind of.
Well, I'm curious, what do you think has sort of changed from the point where the show wasn't working and was canceled to 4 years later, where suddenly?
I think streaming services is what changed. I mean, it's a different sort of income stream, and one thing that Sam Register said to us when he first talked to us about maybe coming back is that he said to Brandon and I and Phil, you guys created the perfect binge-watching show, you just did it 5 years too soon. And so, if that binge-watching model had existed, I mean, it kind of did, but it hadn't really coalesced yet. If that model had existed 5 years ago, we might never have gone off the air, but now that's a whole new way for them to, on a business standpoint, for them to capitalize on it. And then the way we build our stories, it works really well for binge watching. It just does. It wasn't designed for that. We didn't think of that in advance, but we definitely weave this tapestry, and that's a great way to sort of encourage binging a show. So that worked out for us.
What is the I guess a lot of people kind of had like they had like kind of like issue with like the time skip, from going from one season to another. So what was the challenges going into season 3, and kind of like, I mean, was there ever temptation like, okay, maybe we can go like 10 years later, or was it just like, hey, let's
we're doing 1,000 years later, doing the Legion of Superheroes? No, we're not doing that this year. But we are doing a time jump. Not going to say how much, but we feel that's an important element of our show, that we keep our characters aging. It's one of the things that's sort of unique about our show. Most shows, for lots of reasons, sort of create a setting and then characters don't age, particularly animated series. They don't age, perpetual summer, or perpetual characters perpetually 9 years old or 18 years old or however old they were episode 1, they still are in a lot of animated shows in episode 101. And for us, that ability, it's such a major theme for us, this idea of growing up and growing, and how can we show that if we're not moving forward through time. And even in terms of just, one season for us was 6 months more or less in real time. Season 2 was 6 months more or less in real time. It was July through January, and then it was January through July. We just stuck 5 years in the middle between the seasons so that we could really show the evolution of these characters, the maturing of these characters, their growth. We feel that's something that's unique to this presentation of these DC heroes, something that we can do that a live action show couldn't do, something that we can do that most animated series don't do. And so that's something that we wanted to keep doing, so that we really continue that evolution.
Can you tease anything about your versions of Sissy and Stephanie, and what made you decide to bring Stephanie into the story?
Well, it was kind of a plan from the beginning. I mean, when we put Burnell Jones and his young daughter into season 1, who's Sissy, we didn't name her, but we named him, so anyone who felt like, oh, who is this Burnell Jones? Oh, he's the father of Sissy King Jones. Okay, then, wait, that's Arrowhead. So on one level, that wasn't an accident. It's like, oh, wait, I'll use Burnell Jones, and oh, gee, it turns out, now we knew that. So, and the same thing by using Stephanie in season 2 in a couple of brief scenes in one episode. The idea is that our young heroes, our season 1 heroes, our season 2 heroes, were inspired by the Justice League, and that they're now getting to the point where they're inspiring a new generation of young heroes. And that was always something that we had built into this, that this was a generational thing. And it doesn't begin with Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, and it doesn't end with Nightwing, Superboy, and Wonder Girl. And so we wanted to keep that going. So now we have characters, ranging in age from Jay Garrick, who's in his 90s at this point, to characters as young as Spoiler and Arrowhead, and frankly even younger. I'm not going to say who, but we've got some other characters that we at least cameo even younger in the show. So that idea of Barry Allen being inspired by Jay Garrick and Wally West being inspired by Barry Allen, and that ongoing sort of notion of this being generational is, again, part and parcel of what our show is.
In the season 1 and season 2, the team changes. The characters have changed and they grew up, and now we're going to see another change in dynamic within the team. And you go into what made the decision to change the lineup, sort of say?
Again, in a world that... Well, one of the things that we decided at the beginning, and Brandon talked about this at the panel a little bit, is that when Sam first came to us and said Young Justice, Brandon and I were both like, no. Because here was Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, and here was Teen Titans, and they'd been both great shows, and we were like, where is their territory for us to sort of plant our own flag there? And really, Brandon came up with it. It was this idea of, well, what if we did something that is more covert ops, and what if we made this a show that's a teenage show first, in a more realistic vein, and a covert ops show second, and a superhero show only third. And what that meant is that we did everything we could to lend. I mean, obviously, we got science fiction, we got superheroes, we got, Zatanna saying spells backwards. I'm not trying to pretend it's the real world, but on the other hand, we wanted to do as much to ground it in reality as possible. So things even like the timestamps were ways for us to say, this is where it is. This is when it's happening. We have to keep track of that time. By the way, if I'd known what a pain in the ass the timestamps were, to keep track of time zones and everything, I would never have done them. But having done them, we're stuck with them. And I do think they've been useful in that vein. things like the way Phil and Brandon designed the costumes so that they don't all look like they all shop at Superheroes Are Us at the same store, that everyone's costume is unique to their needs. We wanted to ground it in reality, and so another thing about that is that as characters get older and change, some of them will walk away from this, some of them will die, some of them new characters will come up. Also, we were doing a DC Universe show, and so, if you don't there comes a point where if you don't do Cassie Sandsmark now, when are you going to get to do her? If you don't, we showed 8-year-old Sissy Burnell-Jones in season 1. If we don't put her in season 3, then by the time we get to season 4 and 5, it may just be too late. So part of it is the show's sort of telling us it's got its own drive, and the characters are aging, and because they age, Billy Batson's not going to be 10 years old forever. And you saw that even just between season 1 and season 2. The Captain Marvel model stays the same, but Billy's model changed drastically between season 1 and season 2. And so that's just something we always have to keep aware of, is where our various characters are in the timeline at any given time.
With the fan support that came after the cancellation and the petitions and the online support that you all have, do you feel a huge amount of pressure to please the people that have backed this so hard?
Always. But we felt that from day one. It's not like this was some original property. This was, characters, we're dealing with Dick Grayson, with Wally West, with Connor Kent, even some of the characters that were a little more obscure, like Miss Martian or Artemis, or were in essence more or less original, like Cal Durham. We're carrying the weight of 75 years of DC Comics continuity. I did Spider-Man for Sony and Marvel. I did Star Wars Rebels. Talk about pressure. So, we've always sort of felt that. All we can do, and this I do feel strongly about, is Brandon and Phil and I and the rest of the incredible cast and crew we have on this show. We are making the show that we want to see. And the reason we do that is I feel like I can't be guessing at what the fans want. I've got to be passionate about what we're doing, because if I'm not passionate about it, how can I expect any fan, casual or otherwise, to ever be passionate about it? But what we always do is we do that. We write to our passions, we draw to our passions, we do all the work to our passions, and then we just cross our fingers and hope that there are enough people out there who agree with us that they like it. And the good news is that obviously, at least for 2 seasons, that's been the case, and that method has served us very well, so we're sticking with it. There are without a doubt going to be things that happen in season 3 that individual fans aren't going to like, and there are going to be things that they love, and we're hoping on average that they love more than they don't like. But I think in general, if you like season 1 and season 2, you're going to love season 3, because it's not just more of the same. It's the next it's the next evolution up. It's really taking everything we've done and upping the ante even more. And I'm thrilled with what we've done so far. Some of the stories that we've got going for this 3rd season are just stunning to me on a lot of levels. Even to me, just like, wow, we're doing this. We're going there, and I think it's going to be great.
Whose idea was it to revamp Sportsmaster? Because that's a very obscure character, at least to me, and to see him looking at, pardon language, badass like that, it's like, okay, I actually like this character now.
That was some combination of me, Brandon, and probably Kevin Hops, who was our staff writer on season 1. And then, obviously, the thing that made it work, the thing that makes it sing, is Phil Bourassa's design of the character. But really, what the Sportsmaster thing came out very organically, just out of the choice to use Artemis. Once we sort of fixed on Artemis as one of our core 6 characters, her backstory is her parents were supervillains. And so, who were her parents? Her parents were Huntress and Sportsmaster. And then there was a discussion of like Sportsmaster. I mean, we're really going to do Sportsmaster? And it's like, wait, we can do Sportsmaster. We're going to ditch out on some of the sillier things like, baseball bats and big, catcher's mitts and stuff like that. But if you think of a lot of, Olympic track and field events evolved out of warfare. So if you using a shot put, if you're using the hammer, if you're using a javelin, those are weapons of war. And so if you think of Sportsmaster along those lines, someone who's trained in archery, trained in all these kind of events that evolved out of warfare, this is a dangerous guy. And then from the standpoint of personality, I said at the panel, we thought of Sportsmaster as sort of, Teen Titans had so done Slade, so done Deathstroke, that we felt like we'd get to him eventually, but we didn't want to use him right away. But it felt to us like Sportsmaster could be sort of a blue-collar Deathstroke. The guy who wasn't quite as successful, but was badass. And then you see what Phil designed, and huge props to Nick Chinland, who plays Sportsmaster, and all our voice cast, but what Nick brought to that part, and it's like we sat back and said, wow, we just made Sportsmaster cool. And on one level that made us kind of arrogant, because we were like, well, if we can make Sportsmaster cool, we can make anybody cool. And so that's been fun. It's like, all right, let's see what we can do with Professor Oho.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but your season 1 theme was Secrets and Lies.
Mm-hmm.
Season 2 was Freshmen and Seniors.
Well, we have multiple. Secrets and Lies runs through all 3 seasons, and will always be a part of the show because we're doing a show that focuses on covert ops. I would say the contrast between season 1 and season 2. Season 1 was about the relationship between the mentors and the proteges, the heroes and the quote-unquote sidekicks. Difference in season 2 is that it was, it's like, okay, let's take the mentors, let's send the main ones out into outer space for 14 episodes or 15 episodes, and let's put the burden on the seniors now to be mentors to these freshmen. And so that was really the contrast. Secrets and Lies run through the whole thing. The generational themes run through the whole thing. But I think the contrasting between season 1 and season 2 was, how are the kids relating to these adults? Now how are the freshmen relating to these seniors? And how are those seniors who were kids just a little while ago dealing with mentoring these even younger heroes? And again, all that will continue into season 3. But things are even more sort of scattered. Things kind of fall apart a bit at the beginning of season 3, and we move forward from there.
Do you think that if the show continued on Cartoon Network, would you have the same storyline as you would have now?
We'd have the same basic storyline. I mean, we have a little more. We definitely have more freedom now to deal with more adult themes. It seems appropriate to us. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. It's the same show. I don't think people will turn into season 3 and suddenly go, wow, it's pornographic now, or anything like that. That's not going to happen. I want to make sure I'm clearly saying that's not happening. But on the other hand, our characters are aging. So, the issues that 14-year-old Dick Grayson is dealing with are dealt with, in season 1 are very different than what 19-year-old Dick Grayson dealt with in season 2, and are different still from where he is. I'm not going to exactly say how old he is, but what still older Dick Grayson is going to be dealing with in season 3, and that's true for all our characters, particularly the ones, though, that you've been seeing since day 1. The season 1 core team is continuing to move forward, and so what that means is that the themes are more mature, And the good news is that we have the freedom being on a streaming service and not having to deal with the same standards and practices concerns that Cartoon Network have, that we can be a little more upfront about those themes than we were able to do at Cartoon Network. But the basics of it haven't changed. We had a basic game plan, that hasn't changed. We've left ourselves open to discovery as we go. But again, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just evolving it as organically as we possibly can.
Can you talk a little bit about 13, your new character? Tell us a little bit about who she is and what role she's going to serve in the season.
Well, she is she's based on Tracy 13. So I'm not going to tell you much more than that. I'm not big on spoilers. I like the character spoiler, but I'm not big on spoilers, and so I'm not going to give you too much information. But she joins the team, and we think she's a real fun character. We've recorded the first, well, at least pieces of the first 10 episodes. So we're not revealing who's playing who yet, but we've recorded the actress who plays her, and it was just really great. And her powers are magic based, just as Tracy's are, but we've done a little Young Justice twist on it, and that's about all I'm prepared to say right now.
When you first developed Young Justice, it was before the New 52 initiative. Now that New 52 had been around for a couple of years, will any of those concepts or designs be reflected in the series?
Well, when we came back, it was just after Rebirth. So Rebirth is a organic semi-reboot of New 52. Just in terms of where I was, I didn't read a lot of New 52. It's not a comment on it. I just was really busy doing Star Wars Rebels, so I was reading a lot of Star Wars stuff right then. But I've been reading all of Rebirth. I mean, I'm a couple months behind because I'm also kind of busy, but I've literally been reading all of Rebirth and read a few issues of Nightwing last night, and an issue of Red Hood and the Outlaws this morning, and I'm literally reading all the Rebirth stuff, and so you're definitely going to see some Rebirth elements. I'm not going to say what, but you're definitely, I mean, just the fact that we're using spoiler as opposed to, I mean, we knew we were doing Stephanie Brown, and it was like, okay, we're going to do her as Robin, we're going to do her as Batgirl, we're going to do her as Spoiler. And Spoiler appealed to me specifically because that's a unique identity, as opposed to her being the upteenth Robin or the upteenth Batgirl. Let's let her be unique. Also, this is her first appearance, and Stephanie showed up for the first time. She was Spoiler, not Robin or Batgirl, so that seemed to fit. But it didn't hurt that Rebirth has her as Spoiler now. So it felt like, yeah, this just feels right. So you'll see elements from Rebirth playing in a bit, but basically this is still Earth 16. This is the universe we've charted, and again, it's an organic moving forward from that. We're not really trying to inject X or Y specifically, but it, something like that doesn't hurt.
It is, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I guess.
There's 26 episodes. Did that number come out organically within the story, or was that a set number that was like given to you guys?
It's often a set number. I think a lot of animated series today are created with sets of 13. So it was a number we were used to working with. Our first season was 26 episodes. It seems to be sort of an industry standard. So it was nice to get. I mean, believe me, I would much rather have 26 than 13. I think it works better for Young Justice. I think our second season, for us, 20 episodes, we were happy to have it. Boy, 26 would have been much nicer to, change the pace, have more stories that maybe jump off of the main storyline that runs through the season and maybe do some character building or just side explorations. It changes the pace of the series from 20 to 26, so we're very happy to be back to a 26 episode order.
So what was the, I know I saw some of the images and Static basically kind of grown up and stuff. Was,
Yeah.
were you kind of tempted to kind of go to the comic design, or did y'all just want to kind of do something very unique for that character for the show?
In terms of design.
Yeah, in terms of design wise.
I'll leave the design questions to Phil Bourassa.
Oh, yeah.
He's
Well,
really
just static period.
taken
I mean,
the lead.
where are y'all taking it for season 3? I guess since now he's kind of separated from his little crew, and he's with them now.
Yeah.
With team now.
Well, kind of hesitant to spoil anything about what we're going to be doing with Static. So it was enough that we even showed him. We had a lot of conversations about, do we show any of these characters? Like, what are we going to take to Comic-Con? So yeah, we ultimately decided to show, but not necessarily because we wanted to. We like to keep our secrets.
With the current team, his character-wise, like, what is his dynamic with this new team now, since he's like kind of full tilt established now?
Yep, you'll have to wait for the show. Sorry.
It's all good.
What was it like to see the fan reaction when it was announced that the show was coming back?
Amazing. I mean, I wasn't sure that we would come back, right? Like, it's not uncommon to have 2 seasons and then you're done. So I thought, great, we had a good run. I was kind of mentally putting the series behind me. It was sad. I think we were all sad. We loved the show. It was the first show I'd gotten to produce and write on and be a creator for. And it was sad. I put it out of my head. But Young Justice stayed around. People found it, various streaming sites. People kept talking about it. Social media was becoming more and more of a thing. So that people were able to go online and start petitions and tweet about it and tell their friends about it and spread the word about it. That was an amazing thing to sit back and watch. And incredibly gratifying. I mean, we're making these shows for fans. We're making something that we hope makes them happy. And that was the evidence that we needed, that we did our jobs right. So it was so incredibly gratifying to know that we did make something that people really loved and cared about, and cared enough about that they wanted to tell the world about it in such numbers. The Warner Brothers could not ignore them and had to bring us back for a 3rd season. It's amazing. How often does that happen? Not often.
You've had the Young Justice video game though, that came out after season 2.
Yeah.
So are there elements from the video game that are going to kind of like bleed over into season 3? How's that going to work?
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into any specifics on it, but there's like everything that's in the canon of the show, the video game, the comic books, and of course all of the episodes that we made, it's all canon, and it all becomes reference points for all of the characters as they continue to grow. So, like I said, I won't go into specifics about story, but it's all game in 3rd season to pull in any and all of those elements that are part of our canon.
Any characters from any of the previous seasons you're excited to see get more screen time?
All of them. It's hard to pick favorites, like picking a favorite kid. We got to know and love so many characters. Right? I mean, we did a pretty rich DC universe. We established a core group, and we continued to build a DC universe around them, and it continued to grow and grow. Very much an important part of the series, showing the DC universe grow with our characters, seeing how that DC universe affects our core characters. But as to like a specific character to come back, honestly, I really do have a difficult time picking. Honestly, I can't. Sorry. They're all very near and dear to my heart. I had fun, writing stuff for all of them.
Was it easy to get back into the groove of writing these characters?
It was, yeah. There were a lot of like little things that I'd forgotten. Again, it was sad for me to let the show go when it ended, and it was like some kind of weird thing in my head where I was like pushing it out of my head, almost trying to forget it so I could move on to the next things that I was working on. So there was actually quite a bit of work for me to like, wow, we're back. I got to remember all the stuff that we did because it's extremely deep. Like the show Bible, all of the backstories for the characters, it was a lot to kind of re-download into my head. But stepping back into that world was easy. Like that was like stepping back into your home or something, because again, been able to help so much in building that world and define it, that it was very comfortable for me. It was these were all things I'd always wanted to explore, and if I'd ever gotten the chance to make a superhero show of my own someday, I finally got to do it. And doing it with Greg and doing it with Phil and our team, I could get along great with these guys. We connect. I connect with Greg, honestly, better than any other creative collaboration I've had in my career. We click really well. We have a lot of the similar ideas. We have a lot of similar things that we're going for in building worlds and building stories and building characters. And so it was just easy to slip back into it and get in a room with Greg and start crafting our third season.
Has there ever been any like a character that maybe you wanted to use? 'Cause I know this show, much like Bruce Timm's, like cartoons and stuff, they use a lot of obscure characters and stuff.
Yeah.
So was there ever like an obscure character that maybe they were kind of like, well, don't use him yet or use her yet or anything like that?
No, not really. You mean like from DC? Or?
Yeah, just from DC, or did y'all just kind of had like, oh yeah, y'all can just use anything y'all want?
Yeah, not really. DC's been really supportive of us using their characters, and we've always worked very closely with them and looped them in on what we're doing, and they've weighed in and helped make choices here and there. But for the most part, they really have just been able to run. In terms of, just to point out some kind of obscure characters, I definitely was interested in getting some of the Super Friends characters in there through the Runaways. I grew up with Super Friends. I think that was my first exposure to the DC universe, I think. So it was a lot of fun to work in, like Marvin and Wendy and all of our Runaway characters, El Dorado and Samurai. So that was fun for me, and it was nice to be able to use those characters because they were telling an important story. They were reflecting something very specific going on in our Young Justice universe. We were giving them powers. We could go in and mess with their origins a little bit. You can't really do that with any other DC characters. We really try to respect all the origins and backstories of the DC universe characters because we know fans want that and need that. We get that as fans ourselves. But with the Super Friends characters, there's a little more flexibility there. And so folding them in became a great storytelling tool to help show what the Reach aliens were up to in their invasion of Earth and what they were after with the Metagene. So I was really excited to be able to fold those characters in a meaningful way.
Any Wonder Twins?
Wonder Twins. There are some that we haven't gotten to yet, huh?
Beyond you and Greg, are any other writers from the original series coming back?
Yeah. I don't want to go into like all of the announcements and stuff for that. I think we've got ways to go before we premiere, so I'm trying to save a lot of announcements and stuff. So stay tuned for that.
Well, Wally disappeared at the end of the season 2, and we don't know the time skip in season 3 yet. Will that still be a resonating point within season 3?
Yeah, again, I don't want to go into it, but anytime there's a death in real life, you're strongly affected by it. And so certainly we're very much about honoring big events in people's lives, and of course we will write accordingly.
Do you like writing the episodes that have a longer arc, or do you like the one-off episodes that
both? Yeah, I mean, writing a big arc it's a lot of work. It's so much information to track, and it's a lot to produce as well. It's difficult even from a crew standpoint, from teams of directors that only get because we have 3 directors, the directors only get every 3rd episode, but they have to know what's going on in the episodes that they are not directing, because there are obviously the stories are tracking through. And so it's a lot of work for us to write and track all of those through the scripts. It's even more work once it gets to storyboards to make sure that those themes, those stories, or those important plot points are being tracked through in every single episode, so that there's a uniformity to it, despite 3 different crews, having a hand in bringing our scripts to life on screen. That said, it is nice to just have a one-off episode now and then that doesn't actually have to we don't have to work too hard to make it tie into the bigger story. Those are like relaxing. It's nice. You don't have to think too much about it. It allows a little more creative involvement from the teams involved. They can, add or subtract things sometimes without affecting the larger storyline. So it's relaxing and nice to work on those. And what's nice about them is that they can still be very meaningful to the bigger story without actually continuing the main plot. You might just learn something new about a character or something, and that can be very satisfying from an audience point of view as well. So it's fun to do both.
Whose idea was it to have the Martian in season 2 actually have like a blue beetle scarab?
The Blue Beetle scarab
Yeah,
itself?
for the scarab for the Martian itself, because that was kind of something I'd never.
Oh, I see. Well, I think in talking through how the scarabs are used, we just reasoned that if one landed on Earth, one must have landed on Mars as well, and several other planets. So it just seemed like that was part of the logic. That was us also showing how the scarabs worked, what they were designed to be. And it just felt like we needed that in there as a texture to define the reach in general.
Now, speaking of creative freedoms, being on a streaming service, are you still stuck doing like a 22-minute episode, or can you do a 30-minute episode and 18-minute another time?
That's a great question, and honestly one that we haven't fully settled on yet. So I think the goal is probably to make something that could go in other areas if we wanted it to. I mean, that's why we're still making these in the 30-minute format, if you will, even though it's not what we turn in, right? It's often like 22 minutes once you pad it out with commercial breaks, that's your 30 minutes. So it's just kind of how we set things up in terms of budget. Maybe there will be future possibilities or something for distribution that we're just unaware of, where the 30-minute format is just ideal. So that's why we're still working with that format. But in terms of like, can one episode be 20 minutes and one episode be 30 minutes? I'm actually not sure yet. We're still kind of figuring those things out right now.
You spoke to your appreciation for the fan support, for trying to get the petitions to get the show back. Coming back to writing, did you feel the pressure to deliver what people loved so much?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's huge pressure. It's like, again, coming off of the earlier question of like, what was it like to see the crowd response, and to know that the crowd response is what brought our show back for a third season. That puts big pressure on you. It's like, wow, they brought us back. Now what do we do? Now we got to perform. Now we got to give them something that makes them really happy. So it's always pressure just making a show for an audience of fans that already have a built-in fan base. It's the DC universe. There's a huge fan base out there. It's not like we just created something new and we're building a fan base. There's a lot of people out there that already have ideas about how the universe needs to be depicted, and their characters, their favorite characters need to be shown a certain way. That is a lot of pressure. So, we do what we can to go through the DC universe, look at the history of the characters that we're working with, learn about them, learn what it is that fans like about them, and figure out how we can honor all of that in our show, and sometimes maybe bring something new to the table as well with that character.
You talked about your own fandom, before you were doing this show. Was there a certain thing that you had always been thinking about growing up that you were able to incorporate into the series in the first 2 seasons?
Yeah, I was of the generation that grew up with G.I. Joe. So that whole military angle was very interesting to me. I watched a lot of World War II movies when I was a kid, and G.I. Joe, and then later I was getting into shows like Robotech, which are again kind of more on the military side. They tell long form storytelling, very soap opera almost, but in an animated form. So those things I think are heavily featured in Young Justice. It does have the covert ops kind of military vibe to it. It does have the long form storytelling with a lot of dramatic personal stories within it. And Greg naturally brings that to the table. It was something I was already wanting to do, and again, that's another reason why we're a pretty good fit creatively. So, yeah, I think that helped, getting some of those textures into the show to hopefully separate us from the great DC animation that came before us.
Was there ever a storyline direction that you were kind of hesitant that fans might kind of go negative with, or y'all just kind of just went through just like, yeah, we'll see how it happens?
Well, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of one. I can't think of one that we thought might be too controversial to do. There was the only time that I think Greg and I might have ever disagreed about what to do was probably in the first season, and that's of course the natural place where you're going to find disagreements as you're starting up a new series. I think the one story I don't mind sharing is I didn't want talking apes or monkeys in the show in first season. So that was like my one thing, was like we were trying to really establish like a very realistic and grounded world, and we did some offshoots. We had like a Dr. Fate, we did a magic episode, and we did another magic episode with Clarion, and so we did have some of those, but for the most part we were trying to stay very close to what does a realistic world feel like, and what characters can help make that world feel that way. And so that was my one thing that I had put down. It was like, no talking monkeys, no talking apes. Let's save those for later down the road and introduce them once things get a little crazier in our world. So even like, aliens and stuff, we saved alien invasion stuff for the second season. There was a very specific reason for that. We wanted that first season to feel as realistic as possible.
Well, even with that dream sequence in the first season and stuff, when they went through that whole, like, I guess that reality thing, was that kind of like closest to y'all were going to go with the alien invasion?
Was that, oh, right. That was the Miss Martian training sequence where
session.
Everybody was in. Yeah. And that was something I specifically did not want any DC aliens visualized in that show, because that would have changed the story completely.
Yeah.
The whole idea of the training scenario was that it needs to be like a heart attack, just something that strikes from out of nowhere. And what do you do about that? If you had assigned an alien race to that, it would have changed the story. It would have felt more like a plot or something. It would have posed questions that would have distracted from the main point of the training session. So we purposefully avoided that and just came up with something that looked new and different and you couldn't pin down in the DC universe.
That episode did have a lot of foreshadowing as to what would happen in season 2, though. Was there anything maybe in season 2 that could kind of foreshadow season 3? Did you have that in mind? I mean, specifics, obviously.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in season 2 that, and season 1 and season 2 naturally progress into season 3, and I think you'll feel that. I hesitate that we were setting things up specifically for season 3. It's more that, again, when we got back into the writer's room on our first day for the third season, we just had to look back at what had been done before and what would be the next natural step. And that's really how we came up with our third season.
If you had gotten the third season 4 or 5 years ago, would there not have been a time jump?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, the time jumps are useful just to, grow our characters. Since we're paying close attention to real time and tracking every day on the calendar in our show, you need time jumps to progress your characters forward, to find out how they've grown, where they're at now, what are the new problems they're going to be facing. So I think those are important. Yeah, I think it's an important texture of the show.
One more question.
Okay.
Since we don't know if we're having a season 4 or season 5, it'd be crazy not to give you guys more seasons. Would the story of season 3 be a fitting end within itself for you guys, or would you just be like, oh, we still want something moving forward?
Well, I don't think we would ever want to make like a definitive end. I know that kind of drove people crazy about the end of our second season. I know a lot of people thought of it as a cliffhanger. We did not. Nobody was left endangered. or in jeopardy or immediate, danger of losing their life or something like that. It was just business as usual. I mean, that's why those lines were there, was to tell people this isn't a cliffhanger. Life continues. It's business as usual. Bad guys are still going to be bad guys. Good guys are still going to be good guys. The fight's going to continue no matter who rises or falls. That is an unending battle between good and evil. That's how life works. And that's what we want the show to reflect, is real life. So there will never be like a definitive end to it. So that said, I felt like, where we ended was good. I felt like we closed a lot of big stories. We'd grown our characters. We got to really explore themes of generations and growth within the characters that we introduced from our first season. I think we were very happy with where we concluded in our second season. That said, we wanted to do more. We were ready to. We had all kinds of story cards on the wall in the writer's room that hadn't been hit yet. And those immediately popped up as we sat down to define our third season. I can't say that third season would have an end, or fourth season, or fifth. I mean, cliffhanger? I don't know if we'll do a cliffhanger or not. But
It's like season 2, man.
But yeah, I think that's the bottom line, is we'll never do a definitive ending, no matter how many seasons we get.
Even when you know it's over, like we don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, I don't know why we would. Like I said, the bad guys are still going to be out there, and good guys are still going to need to deal with them. I think it would be weird to end the story with all evil has been vanquished. We can't, because that would be the only actual ending that you could do, and I can't imagine doing that. So.
And actually, finally, you the question. You're the man for this.
Okay.
Statics redesign.
Oh man, I just answered that twice.
No, actually, this is good. Were you tempted to kind of go back to his milestone design, or were y'all just like, hey, we want to do something fresh and new?
So there's like the truthful answer, which I'm going to give you. This show's so big, right, that I don't really have a whole lot of time to marinate on one character.
Okay.
But I've worked on Static in various ways over the years. It was actually where I got my start in animation. I started on the Static Shock show that we were producing at WB about 15 years ago. And so I love the character. And in season 2, he's kind of wearing street clothes, just he's a runaway, basically. He's in that group. And so it's just his civvies. For the season 3, like can't give away too much, but basically where he's at, it didn't feel to me like he needed to go full decked out superhero outfit.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But he still has, so it's still kind of like his civvies, his streetwear, but he's proudly wearing his Static symbol because he's a hero now. He's training under Black Lightning, and so but the characters evolve, so you never know. We might introduce a whole new outfit at some point.
Were there any New 52 or Rebirth designs you used as inspiration?
I don't think so. I mean, it really depends on what you consider New 52 or Rebirth. Young Justice, we came out like before the New 52. And some of the ideas that we were implementing in our series, New 52 did some of those same things, on some level. And I guess Rebirth, some of the designs are an evolution on that. But we don't look to one specific storyline or one specific continuity from the DC stuff in order to come up with our template or our look for the characters. We kind of look at the various interpretations and we see what works and what doesn't work for the context of our story.
So if you were to say have Superman, would he still have his underpants on the outside?
If I were to do Superman, you guys will have to wait and see. Man. I'm not going to try.
Was there ever a design that I guess didn't necessarily like work for what you're doing, or did it kind of like just for the most part everything just kind of naturally just organically?
Yeah, there's stuff that we go through all the time that's just like it's cool, but it doesn't hit the story beats. It doesn't facilitate the requirements of the story. So even if I come up with the coolest design, like if it doesn't hit all the appropriate themes of what we're trying to do, then
Was there a specific character, I should say, was there a specific character that you kind of wanted that design to work and it's just like, I guess we can't do that?
I'm trying to think, man. For this season, yeah, but I can't tell you who.
Okay, all right. So I'm asking all these questions from this season.
Sorry, man.
Anything from season 2, though?
Like I went through various takes on Green Beetle that I remember that were cool, but we didn't quite work. Deathstroke. I did some stuff for Deathstroke that wasn't quite right because of how we wanted him to stack up against Sportsmaster. Because if you have two characters that kind of occupy the same space or they have the same function, you need to create some kind of contrast or have them either contrast or complement each other in different ways. So that would be definitely Deathstroke. There's some cutting room floor stuff that is pretty cool but didn't work.
Is there any are there any differences in sort of how you're approaching producing the show, given the gap in production and the fact you're doing it as a streaming service versus Cartoon Network?
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff that I think we can get away with that in the streaming sort of world that we couldn't get away with on network. There's some stuff like that. It feels like the cuffs are off a little bit. And then there's just practical production concerns. We're trying to make it a show, even though it's a big show in scope and scale. We really want to make it something that's producible, so we have to find ways of staging it that don't, cripple the animators and the storyboard artists. So you're always trying to refine your approach to your craft so that you can get better results. Some stuff, you have to avoid in favor of like trying to keep the production quality up. So, but it's always a challenge.
Is this complete redesign from the ground up, or there were things from before you were canceled that you were like, I want to still try to keep it this way?
So like when we finished, that was I finished drawing in 2012. In the spring of 2012, I was done, and I went and I started working on DC movies. So I didn't think about, if I went back to YJ, this is what I would do differently at that time. But by the time we got back around to working on it, I have a lot of years under my belt since then, and I've added some things to my sort of repertoire, stylistic flourishes, mechanical adjustments that I feel like will make it build a better mousetrap, so to speak. You know what I mean? Not necessarily changing the fundamental DNA of the design theory, but adding things and adjusting mechanical things so that it can actually work better for the animators. Yeah.
It's pretty easy for you to kind of do the runaway designs, considering they were just very simple.
Yes and no. I mean, coming up with cool, compelling sort of civilian outfits, like believable streetwear that animates well, that also sells character, is actually harder than doing these big, bold, colorful superhero uniforms. So in a lot of ways, drawing mundane things is the hardest thing to make interesting. Everybody can draw a giant robot and a ninja, and they're inherently cool. Batman is inherently cool. Try drawing a bus driver and making him interesting. Nobody practices that stuff. So, natural extension of that is the characters in their civvies outfits. I want them to be just as believable. I want them to reflect their character, but there are certain silhouettes that work better for animation. Certain things where you avoid because the character gets lost in it, you know what I mean? So it's always a challenge to come up with that perfect balance of that's something that a 25-year-old, woman who has this particular sort of background would wear, you know what I mean? And their backgrounds are also diverse that, you have to really try to get in that character's skin.
I mean, is that kind of like the same thing with Superboy? Because it seems like his is a very just cut and dry. Like,
It
white
is,
t-shirt,
and that's too because he's like he protests too much. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm not into this, just but he keeps wearing the S. Come on, sir, you like it, Superboy. No, yeah, he's practical. He's trying to just be like, because his thing is like, he didn't want to have to be Superman. They're in some ways it's that thing of not wanting to be your dad or whatever it is. So he's always gonna just go like, I'm not into the capes thing. Like that's you guys.
Is there anything specific within the team? You showed some slides at the panel.
Yeah.
We saw the redesign for Robin and Bart's, and it's obviously homages to other characters, to say. Can you go into that? Like, Bart's obviously has more yellow now.
Yeah, because he's basically paying homage to Wally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
like just the process of like just the redesign, like, oh yeah, we definitely need more yellow in here.
I mean that with every character you want them to, you don't ever want to depart so far away from the tradition that they're not recognizable. You really want to be faithful to the guys and girls that created these characters, and then because we wouldn't be able to carry on doing this stuff if not for these brilliant creators that came before us. So I always liken it to you're tending somebody else's garden, like I'm just the groundskeeper, and then there's going to be other people after us. So we want to leave it like nice, because we got it and it was nice, and we want to add, maybe add your little flourish, and maybe that'll become part of the character's like legacy, and maybe not, but hopefully, you're just carrying the torch for a while. So yeah, I'm always trying to make sure that it's like that feels like that character, like fundamentally, but it's just slightly remixed.
Yeah. So Black Beetle, was it always kind of like in the play to have Black Beetle like this big bodybuilding like hulking character?
Yeah, well, Kevin Graveau has that
voice.
incredible voice, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if I did the design. It's been a long time. I don't know if I did the design before Kevin was cast or if we knew it was going to be Kevin. Anyway, yeah, we knew because we wanted him to be so intimidating. You know what I mean? And we had done a future Blue Beetle where he was, there was like that episode where you see what Jaime will become. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he's like, and he's even pushed beyond Black Beetle. So we always kind of knew we want this dude to just be like, oh my God, like that's the worst, your worst nightmare Beetle. And Kevin was amazing. So.
One last question.
Having worked on the other DC animations, did you make a conscious effort to make sure that the designs of Young Justice were different than, say, what we would see in Teen Titans?
Did I make a conscious effort to make sure it was different than
than the directed,
than the movies?
Yeah.
Well, it's tough because I'm designing both.
Yeah.
So
That's what I mean.
yeah. So YJ was established before I started doing the continuity movies. I'm doing the continuity movies. They have their own narrative. They don't really influence Young Justice. They're in their own, different universe. So they're very separate. Stylistically, the drawing style is the same, but they're totally different stories. I mean, Beast Boy is always going to be this sort of fun, buoyant, like comical character, in every iteration. So that's fundamentally to the character. So that stuff is consistent because that's who those characters are in any. If you want to look at it as like a multiverse, like the way we have all these various multiverses in DC. It's a recurring theme. So those characters' basic core of who they are is always going to be the same, but the context of the story drives the approach to design. Now, stylistically, there's a lot of crossover, so yeah, but that's just the way I draw. It's like my speaking voice, So, but yeah, it's they don't really influence each other beyond that.
Which was your favorite design in season 3 to draw?
Of the ones that we've shown so far. Yeah, I mean, because I can't tell you about. Yeah, I can't tell you about the other stuff. I had a lot of fun designing Blue Beetle, and or not Blue Beetle, Beast Boy, and we're gonna have some fun with him this season, and Tim Drake. I always love drawing the Batman characters. So, yeah, that's a lot of fun. Okay, right on. Thanks.